Colonel Hand understood what was at stake and showed leadership under fire.
Colonel Edward Hand's forgotten legacy during the 10 crucial days. A common question: who was Edward Hand? Edward Hand was a very important leader during the 10 crucial days of the Revolutionary War. His leadership in the Battle of Trenton turned the tides of the war in favor of the Patriots, who went on to defeat the British. Edward Hand was born on December 31st, 1744 in Ireland. He became a doctor and fought for the British. He was stationed in Pennsylvania for 7 years before he quit. He moved to Lancaster to become a local doctor and married Catherine Ewing. Edward Hand joined the Revolutionary Army as a lieutenant colonel on June 5, 1775, the year war broke out. On March 7, 1776, George Washington made him the colonel of the 1st Pennsylvania Regiment. With this regiment, he fought in many battles, including the 2 battles of Trenton and the Battle of Princeton, otherwise known as the 10 Crucial Days. At this point in the Revolution, the Continental Army lost almost all its hope in freedom. They had lost battle after battle while trying to defeat the British. This battle would determine if America would have a chance of winning the Revolution. By the end of 1776, the contracts for the Americans would soon expire. People were losing hope in the Revolution, and if a miracle did not happen soon, they would give up. They were forced to keep retreating until they came to the Delaware River. When they arrived there, they took all of the boats from the New Jersey side at Trenton and traveled to the Pennsylvania side. The British troops took over Trenton and waited for a sign of Washington's troops to make a move. The Americans stayed in Pennsylvania for most of December. The British left Trenton with the Hessians, who were mercenaries from Germany, in charge. Edward Hand and his regiment participated in the First Battle of Trenton. Washington's troops were able to make it all the way to Trenton before the Hessians noticed their arrival. The Hessians, unlike what people think, were not actually drunk that night. As seen on this map, the Hessians tried to make a quick plan to stop Washington's troops. However, they did not have enough time, and the Patriots outnumbered them. They fought with great valor until they realized they had no chance and had to surrender to Washington. The army practically celebrated with one of their first wins in the war, and it was a very important one.
Well, Colonel Hand did not actually ask for this job. He was the second in command to General Fermoy, and General Fermoy had been told by George Washington to keep the British from getting to Trenton until late in the day. But as soon as the first skirmish was about to take place over at 5 Mile Run, not too far from here, General Fermoy just left. He just up and left.
Certainly, it was fortuitous that this happened, because when he left, the next person in command was indeed Colonel Edward Hand. He was trusted by his men. He had really sort of been elected by his men. He'd been with them for a while in the 1st Pennsylvania Regiment. And there was another officer, a major named Henry Miller, who also took part in the delaying actions. And Colonel Hand and Miller together did a much better job, I believe, than, as Major Wilkinson referred to him, that drunkard Roche de Fermoy could have done.
General Charles Cornwallis was called upon by the British to take back Trenton. Cornwallis expected his army to easily overwhelm the Patriots, so he put less effort into strategizing this battle. A Hessian commander suggested that he split his army into 2 separate pathways to reach Trenton, but Cornwallis dismissed the idea. If he had planned out this battle more, the outcome may have been very different. This is where Colonel Hand's first delaying tactics took place. He planned to outmaneuver the British by using guerrilla tactics, which the British were not accustomed to. The British were used to standing in formal lines in an open field where each army would be able to shoot at each other easily with no obstacles in the way. They usually marched in a single or double file line when marching to their destination, and when they were getting ready for battle, it took a long time to set up their formation. This is called European tactics, and Edward Hand and his men depended on this time it took to set up and delay the British.
Well, what's interesting is how many men really were there that day of January 2nd, 1777. According to David Hackett Fisher, there were 8,000 British regulars and Hessians headed toward Trenton. According to McCullough, there were only 5,500. Both of them seem to agree that on that crucial day, Hand had probably a total of about 1,000 men. Most of them Pennsylvania riflemen. There may have been artillery. There are stories of about 8 or 9 guns, so that's certainly possible. As you can see, whether it was 5 to 1 or 8 to 1, he was very definitely outnumbered.
Cornwallis stationed his troops in Princeton and planned to attack with a single large force at Trenton. The town rebels, also known as pickets, had the first skirmish to slow down the British at 8 Mile Run. While this was going on, General Fermoy brought his troops into position at 5 Mile Run, also known as Little Shabakunk Creek. As soon as the British arrived at 5 Mile Run, the Americans started shooting at them. They made such a racket that the British thought it was the whole Continental Army. At 5 Mile Run, a sign states, "At this stream crossing, Continental forces engaged in a delaying action against the vanguard of British and Hessian forces marching from Princeton under the command of General Cornwallis." After brief fighting here, the Continentals withdrew to the south bank of the Shabakunk Creek, where they were able to hold up the British advance for several hours. By the time the British pulled out their cannons and were ready for battle, the Americans were already retreating back to the Shabakunk Creek. A sign at Shabakunk Creek states, "Under the command of Colonel Edward Hand, a successful delaying action fought at the Shabakunk Creek prevented British forces from reaching Trenton before nightfall, where the Second Battle of Trenton took place at the Assunpink Creek, January 2nd, 1777. The skirmish at Shabakunk Creek was the third out of 4 skirmishes that took place before the Second Battle of Trenton. The fourth one was at Stockton Hollow, where George Washington congratulated Hand on how well he was doing delaying the British. He told Hand to delay them for 30 more minutes. The funny thing was, Cornwallis and his men never caught on to what Edward Hand was doing and fell for it 3 times in a row. After the successful Second Battle of Trenton, Washington was able to attack Princeton. He followed the back roads to leave Cornwallis in Trenton with nobody to fight. With Cornwallis gone, Washington easily conquered Princeton against the small amount of troops stationed there. This was all thanks to the delay the day before by Edward Hand's troops at the Assunpink Creek.
He was able to forestall the British advance on Trenton so that George Washington was ultimately not captured, because overnight he took his army through the back roads and took them to Princeton to fight the Battle of Princeton there and be victorious.
Colonel Hand's legacy still lives on in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In Lawrenceville, there is an annual Colonel Hand March to recognize his leadership and legacy.
If it hadn't been for luck, providence, some good military action, we might have lost the entire American Revolution.